Hi, my name is Philip Bither. I'm the Senior Curator for Performing Arts here at the Walker Arts Center. And we're lucky enough today to have Bill Frisell, guitarist, composer, band leader, with us. This is not your first time to the Walker. I think it's about your 20th or something. But on this occasion, Bill is here with Evan King and with Rahim Al-Haj. It's really rare for us, and I think even for you a little bit, to be someplace for a week to work on new music, and we're about 3 or 4 days into it. How's it going?
It's fantastic. I mean, and like you said, it's so rare. I mean, the first day we just started playing, we didn't have much of an idea. Yeah. There was one song that we had played together.
You guys did a shortcut for one of Rahim's a release that he's doing.
Yeah, he's doing I think it's for a benefit for Doctors Without Borders.
That's right.
He's doing a CD with all these different people, that was more like a matter of minutes or,
yes, you guys said
or an hour.
You met in the dressing room for or in a studio, very short amount of time.
Yeah, and just sort of did this thing, and it was also enough to know that, oh, this is, we can play together, but we didn't really have any. We started with really no material and no. I didn't have any preconceptions of what I didn't know what would happen.
Yeah.
And so it was just so nice to have the space without the pressure, where we could just play let things just. Yesterday there was a point where we all like, oh yeah, now we sort of saw the whole picture of what the evening could be. I mean, we're still in the midst of working on it, but it sort of it just revealed itself, like that we had enough material and we're feeling comfortable. And
are you each bringing some of your own compositions here together, or are you really working it out? I should mention that Rahim is a very renowned Iraqi oud player who comes from a very different musical tradition than you come from, and he's I know very respected in Middle Eastern music circles. He's lived here in the States for a number of years now, but has there been a learning process around the Iraqi maqams and musical structures? And
for me, I just didn't even. I had to just. It's just too late for me. I can't. I couldn't. It's even if I start thinking about it, it just. I couldn't even try to go there. But with Avend, he's been studying Persian music, and there's a lot of the terminology and some of the language is the same. So that's where, for me, Avend is sort of like a go-between or a translator for us in a way. If we're dealing in those terms.
When did you guys first meet, and how did you?
Well, I actually met him when he was it was long 25 years ago or more. He was a student in Canada, a volunteer. I played in Edmonton, and he picked us up at the airport.
Really?
He was like, I don't know how old he was, 17 or 18, and I just thought, oh, this is a cool guy. I didn't even know he played music. But we sort of, and he said, I remember he said, I think I'm going to move to Seattle. And it turned, so then a couple years later I moved to Seattle, and then I don't know how it happened, but I saw him on the street or something. And I said, oh yeah, that's that guy that I met in Edmonton, and just one thing led to another. And so we've had a long.
And now he's played in a number of different your ensembles. You've done collaborations.
Just
various things.
Tons of stuff. So he's, for me, is sort of he's just the perfect person to make it comfortable for us all to be. I mean, Rahim is he's just completely open to it's not like he's expecting me to follow any
Right.
of these rules or traditions that
Yeah.
he grew up with. The whole idea is that we try to
meld
find, yeah, and that's where I just can't even begin to understand what he's doing with
structurally.
like, yeah, or with these maqams or the scales and the way they fit together. And I mean, it's I don't even know how many years, centuries,
Right. Yeah.
of it's just a overwhelming amount of stuff.
And
Within that, it's like, well, okay, I have my ears, and
Right.
and since he's okay with me, it's just all
Right.
okay. So.
And he said over lunch the other day that he too was interested in moving his forms and his compositional approach toward yours. I mean, you meet halfway.
Yeah, and there's one it was after I arrived in Minneapolis. Sometimes something will just happen, sort of. It just seems like a random thing, but I was on my computer, and by accident I came across this thing on a song on YouTube. It was on YouTube, and it was a Pop Staples from the Staples Singers, just playing his guitar and it's this old
blues song.
Yeah, kind of a gospel blues, ain't nobody's fault but mine. And I somehow that song just grabbed me at that moment, and it was I think it was the morning before the first time we played together, and then I heard something in that song that, well, yeah, that's kind of, the key is sort of, the oud fits in that key, and so like yesterday we just, Avon and I played that melody. I'm hearing in my head, a lot of people have done that song. Nina Simone has done it, and Blind Willie Johnson, and
right.
Rosetta Tharpe. It sort of has this huge sort of American history,
Right.
goes way back. And I'm hearing that, and we're playing that, and Raheem is reacting to it.
Is the process of opening yourself up to a brand new style of music or a new collaborator more exciting or more fear-inducing? One of the adjectives that sometimes people regularly use in writing about your history as a musician is fearless. And I in our projects together, I've always admired how you are willing to throw yourself off the deep end and into the void, and it seems that it always results in something quite magical. And have you grown to a point now over your history where you trust yourself, you trust the people that you've gotten to know personally enough that you figure something interesting is going to work out?
There's definitely there's a base of trust and confidence that I've slowly built up, but I certainly wouldn't call it fearless, because I definitely have those moments of complete panic. Like not this one, I don't feel. It's somehow lower I don't feel that.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I was thinking of some of the other projects that I've done, actually for the first time at the Walker, where they really were it was like maybe music that I was composing, and it really was the first time.
Yeah, when Blues Dreams, when you put those two groups together, it was so exciting, and it went beautifully. I'm glad it
But
resulted.
I mean, when I think of still, there I was more in some turmoil, and but it's the only way to you have to have that first moment of not knowing what's going to happen, but that was having that chance to do it here, and then you do it once, and then you
keep
learn,
working
you
on it.
learn a lot from just that, do one gig and then it's, oh, okay, now.
And I think that project, which was a Walker commission, like this one happening tomorrow night, was one that really then it didn't really come out as a record for about a year and a half or so. But now, as we look back, I mean, I think, I don't know if you agree, but a lot of people who write about your whole discography and look at it as a wonderful recording, and you just put it out as a DVD, I think.
Oh yeah, there was a live
someone did.
concert with that. Mostly that music from that.
I remember us talking before that project, and you had said, "Well, I've worked with these folks in this kind of trio or quartet capacity, and I've used horns in these other areas, but I haven't, and worked with these other artists in this way. But I really dream of bringing all 7 musicians together and creating a new series of compositions for this kind of ensemble."
Right.
Blur those
Yeah,
worlds.
that's what it was. That was one of those. Sometimes in my whatever I'm looking for in the music, I'll sort of go off on these, not side roads, but you just, if you want to figure something out, you got to go off in these, for a while. But that project was, I felt like it was where the roads were, there was a number of roads kind of came back into the,
right. Yeah.
like I felt like it was really like I was home or something with that.
When I watch you perform, and one of the really riveting parts is to see you in the process of really creation before our eyes, and it's a wonderful thing to see as you're pushing a piece of music forward and trying new things, and it feels like a kind of venturing forth before us. And I read somewhere that someone asked it, what happens if you're improvising within a structure and you play something that you really don't care for and wish you could take back, and you said that's not it so much as it's about the recovery, and you turn it into a plus rather than something that you regretted. It's maybe that mistake will result in something even more interesting. Is that accurate?
Yeah, for sure. And that's how but there's a Leonard Cohen, I don't know if it's in a song or but I heard Leonard Cohen say, and he was referring to making mistakes. But he said a crack is what lets the light come in. And I mean, that's so, whether it's been overused, I don't care.
Yeah,
it's
that's
good.
great. I hadn't heard it before.
Because I mean, in music, it definitely, those are those, you work so hard to get everything right, and then, but so many things I've probably learned more from the mistakes, and you grab something on the guitar that's in the wrong spot, and if you're there and you're hearing it, it's like, that's, you can surprise yourself, and it's like, wow, that actually sounds cool, and then you do it again, and you can, I don't know, that's a great way of learning.
Yeah. That must come back to this idea of being surrounded by trusted colleagues, where
where it's not, you have to be able to be comfortable to where it's okay to make mistakes, and where everybody's not like keeping some kind of score or something.
Right,
it's not about,
or thrown off in some way.
Or people that are forgiving. Everybody that I play with is, if things get turned around or whatever, it's not about pointing that out. It's about everybody trying to make something out of it together. So,
when we think about your music, one of the wonderful things is how eclectic and how curious you've been, and how eclectic the range of styles or types of music that you've entered into. Um, do you consciously think about, oh, I'd love to explore bluegrass music, or this kind of experimental sound a bit more, or write for strings, or I mean, do you just naturally find you're hearing things and you're absorbing things, and your music just takes just starts to take different shape by the influences that you've had, or things bubble up from your history that you didn't expect to be there?
If you're in the world of music, you're just constantly being hit with things, and it just seems natural to, like, wow, there's so much amazing stuff, and it just seems natural to me to grab onto them. And also there's the whole thing about the names that we put on, and this style and that genre and that it just, it doesn't really, when you're in the midst of the music, none of those you're not thinking about any of those names, or whether it's jazz or rock or country or bluegrass or whatever. It's just all those things come later. It seems all the words that describe
the labels,
it. It always comes after the actual act of making the music.
I think that's the universal thing in my conversations with musicians has always been a resistance to the labels that writers or curators or whomever place on things, and so many artists have said it's just about music. And I wondered about the jazz tradition. There's a lot of fear around, is jazz, for a decade or more, is there a future for the music of jazz, and is it a definable form, or is it more a straitjacket term? And a number of musicians that I talk to, jazz artists, or artists who play what might be called jazz, resist the term entirely, and like, well, don't call me a jazz musician. I noticed that you have said in the past that whatever style of music you're playing in, you still consider yourself a jazz. You're playing from a jazz orientation, or a jazz from a jazz musician. You seem to not reject completely the label as much as maybe others.
I don't. For me, that was, and I still don't even know exactly what it. If you ask me to define what it is, I don't know. But it was growing up. I grew up in the 50s and and by the 60s I was playing music, and I played in the school band.
You played clarinet. And
then started, it's such a classic. There's thousands or millions of the same story. I heard the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, and pretty soon I had an electric guitar, and it's just.
I heard your first record purchase was Surfer Girl by Beach Boys. Mine was, I think, P.S. I Love You.
So it's nothing unusual, but there was a point just when I found jazz, and it seemed like at that time, like this is sort of maybe it was in the late 60s, and one thing led to another, and I started hearing what Thelonious Monk and Sonny Rollins and Charlie Parker, and then there was this world of these. I was in Denver, Colorado, and there was this community of this open, welcoming thing that happened that just, it was the most amazing thing. Both in the music, like there was this open, for me, jazz, it was about people taking their experience and transforming it through this, like whatever was in their wildest imagination. And when I listen to Charlie Parker or Sonny Rollins or Monk, I'm not hearing a style, I'm not hearing something that you I don't even know how to say it. It's, you know, they used, like, Charlie Parker was listening to Stravinsky, and he was listening to Hank Williams, and I can hear that.
And they're playing they're playing their own versions of
American
show tunes.
They would play popular music, and it would filter through them, and it was a way for them to just, it was like this kaleidoscope of imagination. It would take whatever was around them, and there, it was like this explosion.
It's a great way to think about it, because in some ways, some people look at jazz history back more like that, say bebop had a sort of rigid certain rules and things, but now people are really open to all kinds of different styles and things. But in reality, what you're saying, and I think is a really good point, is that at that moment in time, people were maybe equally, if not, were really open also to a lot of different influences, sounds. I mean, Sonny Rollins listening to Afro-Cuban music, or Dizzy, and I mean, just absorbing the same way musicians like yourself are absorbing a diverse range.
For me, that's what it, or that was the example that they were setting for me, and then also the community of those musicians. I'm just thinking back at that time, in the whole social interaction, with the racial thing, or it just didn't matter.
Right.
It was, economically or whatever. It was just, I'd go into some bar, and I'm like listening to the drummer. I'm like 17 or 18, and I'm just listening to his cymbal, and then somebody else would ask me, well, do you want to come up and play? And it was just this, it was like this cool, just fantastic world. And that's what I think jazz is for me somehow. So I don't have any, I just don't like when you say jazz
is this and not that.
Yeah, whenever it excludes something, I think for me it was, and it was also the place where from the training that I had in like playing more in the school band and orchestra, where things were, there was, jazz was the place where you could, I want to try, you could try anything, and you could break these rules, and you could, no one got hurt, that's what, so, in music you can do these things that you can be aggressive, or there's dissonance or consonance, or it's just anything is possible, and it's not it doesn't do anything but good as far as I can see.
Which is interesting. I mean, great backers of jazz say that's one of the great statements of American freedom, and why it's been so adopted in so many countries all over the world, of this sense of just freedom, of being able to take the music kind of where you want it to go, and things. Most of the great jazz musicians have their sound and have a very signature quality, whether it's Miles or Charlie Parker or whomever. And you certainly have, ever since I think the first time I heard you play was my brother gave me a record of the Hal Wilner produced Nina Rota,
that's like the
Nina
first,
Rota.
Actually, maybe the first recording ever. Under my own.
Under your name, right? And it was a beautiful piece, but and really your sound was so distinctive, and to this day, you hear a few notes of your playing, and you know it's you. And I know, was that something that you came to naturally, or I think it's funny. When I was online recently, and there's a 20-page discussion on Guitar Player website or something about guys trying to get the right compressor pedals to get the Frisell sound and things like that. And I wondered how you developed your voice, and whether that was something conscious or just a sound you got out of the guitar that you decided you liked and you wanted to continue to perfect.
Yeah, it's just, in a way, I think it's just something you can't help. It's I think everyone has their own sound, and so much of it comes from our inability to actually I mean, my whole, and I think that it's just true with music. When you begin, the very first time you try to make a sound, and you're, when I was, however old I was, you're always hearing something that's just beyond your grasp.
Right.
Like the first time I touched a guitar, it was like, oh, thinking, well, I heard there's something in my mind that I'm trying to reach, and no, that's not it. And it's just this constant. It feels the same now. Every day when I start out, every moment is like that. You're just never there. You're always, there's something further out in your imagination. And I think a lot of the sound, our individual sounds, just come more from our limitations maybe than, like, there's this story about Miles Davis, again, in the jazz world or whatever, saying he couldn't play as high as Dizzy Gillespie, so he played low or something. And then I'm thinking, well, what if, and for me, Miles Davis is one of the most beautiful sounds in the universe. And I'm thinking, well, if he could have played exactly like Dizzy Gillespie, then we wouldn't have had a Miles Davis or something. So it's, I mean, even somebody on that genius level, that came from something that he couldn't do.
Right.
And so many things I do I'm just implying things that I'm imagining in my head. I mean, there's guitar players that I love, like John McLaughlin or Tal Farlow or I mean, or I could name a million guitar players that I could sort of hear in my head, but I just can't get it. So, but I'm just gonna just get as close as I can. And I think there's something in that struggle that's what the sound is.
Yeah.
And then you also mentioned the thing about people mention my pedals and the equipment, and I think that's got so little to do with it's
people get hung up on that on the technology
the
side.
thing in your imagination is so much. What's in your imagination is so much more important than what the actual instrument is.
Although the effects you use and the age we live in, where music can be produced using some very interesting technology and elements, it's very different than the era when you could hand someone a written score and say, "This is my music." How do you equate your process of writing music to, say, a more classical tradition, where maybe a composer goes and sits by themselves or with a piano and really writes down their composition in that way? In many ways, your studio and your collaborations with musicians are kind of part of your composition process.
Yeah, I think about that a lot, because recently I've actually written a couple things where I've just written the music and then I give it away to somebody else. And
how's it sound when you?
It's okay, but I have to say, there's this thing that happens when I'm with. I do rely on the people I'm with to add this little extra rub or something. So I've actually been struggling with this a little bit, to how to maybe notate things more precisely, or add another layer of some sort of something that there is a way to just hand this over to someone and have it be fully formed. Because for me, again, the music is so much about the sort of chemistry between the people. And I'm so lucky to have this pretty large circle of people that I play with that we don't have to really talk about anything. We just sort of have an understanding, and I can write, I could write a score that looks, it's
notes on a page.
Like a 4-part thing or whatever
right,
it is.
Sure.
That I could give it to a string quartet and they could play it or something. But
right.
when I'm with my guys, it's like I don't. Just all these other things happen, or I sort of count on them to bring.
Well, and maybe it's something about that music is in such a different point in our history that I know Eno would talk about the studio, as really the new instrument in some way. You're maybe both referencing that, but also talking about the community of musicians, and that dates back probably ages, but certainly in earlier eras of jazz when Ellington would count on, some Johnny Hodges or whatever, and people would have groups of musicians that they would come to trust and to create their sound. But then that does mean it's different than what's just on the page. It's those two things that remain separate somewhat.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I'm trying to figure out how to. I just heard my friend Don Byron, who also I played at the Walker with.
Yes, you did.
Him.
Yeah.
And he wrote some music for piano. He wrote these etudes for piano. And I just was listening to this, and he really succeeded. I listened to it, and it was like, this is done. It sounds like
you could hear Byron's sound.
Yeah, and it was amazing because it had all the stuff, that he would. When you hear his groups and you can hear how his imagination and his organization and unorganization and everything.
Right. He was able to write that into the 80s.
Yeah, somehow he really got it, and that was he said that's what he was trying to, he really wanted to notate it, and someone played it, and it was his thing, and so I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, I hope I can get to that at some point.
This notion of communities, it's one of the things that I've also admired about you've seemed throughout your career to surround yourself with groups of artists who you build really long-lasting bonds with, but they kind of flow in and out of your different recordings and your different touring bands, and in some ways they seem to be at sort of 3 different levels, and some are legends who you have admired as a young person. I mean, your trios with Paul Motian and Ron Carter and the trio with Paul Motian and Joe Lovano and things, and then others are kind of peer level, but there's also a group of younger players who it seems, and Avon may have been part of that, but Jenny Scheinman and others in the Seattle scene, and who you've really brought in many ways to the public's attention, or at least to I was introduced to their music. Some have gone on and continue to do their own things and stuff. And do you seek out, players who you feel sometimes deserve a greater visibility, and you're intrigued by their approach, but by having them join you, you can not only build that community, but you can also help focus some attention on these maybe talents that haven't been recognized as much.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really thinking about that at all. It's just, again, it's in the world, and I'll hear somebody, and I just want to play with them. I'm not thinking.
You'll hear them at a club or on a record or something like that.
Yeah, or we meet, and there's always somebody that I want to. Just, it's more like I want to learn from them. I'm not trying to
do anything for them.
I'm like, it's total selfish, I'm just looking to learn something from them, and I've been just so, I don't know, I feel so lucky being in this, whatever's going on with this.
Well, I think it's your openness too to hearing new things and new folks, and something like you said. I think it was a year or two ago when you had just met Raheem, and you said, "Oh, I'd like to do something with that guy." And it takes sometimes a little while, but
Yeah,
then
this took a while.
there's a place to then explore that a bit more. And is that how how a number of your collaborations, or will you pick up the phone and say, "Hey, why don't you join me on a date someplace, a live performance"?
Yeah,
Is that how you introduce new people into your groups and things like that?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, yeah, it happens different. Sometimes it could happen fast, or sometimes it takes a while. Like with Raheem, I met him, I don't even know, years ago we met, and sort of kept talking about trying to do something, and then it just gradually, this was our chance. But or sometimes I don't know, it could just be an accident somehow. Like, I'm trying to think of an example. If somebody gets sick and I need to get somebody else, or
Yeah.
there's always a bunch of people floating around that there's a lot of people out there now I'd like to play with more. And
With your busy life, how do you find the opportunities to hear new things? Where do you hear? Do you hear things online? People send you things? Where do you find your inspiration?
yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's really difficult for me to listen to music.
Yeah.
The way when I think of years ago and
Right.
sitting around and listening to a whole album in
Yeah.
one sitting, it doesn't happen hardly at all anymore.
Right.
So, and then people do send me stuff, and I've got piles of stuff at home that I feel
Right.
so guilty because I haven't been able to.
I know
hear
that
it.
feeling.
Yeah, and I know
Yeah.
you must get it's just, and now everybody makes a CD.
Sure. Right.
Anybody can make a CD. So it's just this mountains of this stuff, and
Yeah.
it's I just can't hear it. So I don't know how it just. A lot of times it's actually not even hearing. A lot of people I play with, I sort of knew that I wanted to play with them even before I heard them.
Because of what you sensed
yeah,
them as
just
people?
you meet them. Well, even Avend,
Yeah.
I think, like when I met him, before I even knew what instrument he played, I guess, and there's this something going on or Greg Lease, who's on that Blues Dream
Sure.
album, when we met at the Walker Art Center.
Yeah, you told me that.
Yeah, that's where.
Yeah, that's right. I can't remember what project, but
I was playing with Victor Krauss and Jerry Douglas, and Greg came to hear us.
It was
play.
when we did the Nashville project. Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh wow, and he came up to me after he was friends with Claudia Engelhardt, who does sound with me, and she said, "Oh, this is my friend Greg," and so we just talked, and I was just.
And he was in town for something else.
Yeah,
or
he was
something?
playing with Katie Lang or something, and I just. It was like I knew that we had, so then I called him on the phone sometime later,
Yeah.
and asked him to play on the album, and so that was one of those.
Right.
Maybe that was quicker, that was.
And you like several other musicians. I mean, with Greg, you really forged an interesting bond, and I know you felt like you had this kind of yin-yang relationship in that he really grew up through becoming a master in country and bluegrass music and things, and you went the jazz route, but you kind of complemented each other.
Yeah, and he's one of those. I just feel like we're some kind of brothers. We're separated at birth or something, but we really, we're close to the same age, and our birthdays are exactly 6 months apart. He's left-handed and I'm right-handed, but it's just like we grew up with all the same stuff, with the Beach Boys and the Beatles and Paul Butterfield and all this, whatever.
Yeah, sure.
It's just like bam, bam, bam. And then there was that point where I I don't know, I heard Wes Montgomery and he heard Hank Williams or
Right,
something,
sure.
and then we sort of came back.
One of my, I mean, it was one of many very special memories and moments at the Walker was when we built this new theater.
Oh, yeah.
And it opened in April of 2005, and we invited 12 artists from around the world to come in the same day and to share the celebration, and you were good enough and very generous. You and Greg came and did several short sets with us.
Yeah, that was
and
really
it was just beautiful hearing you guys just together and really inaugurating musically, sonically, this space in many ways.
So that was great to. Yeah, that was the first time I saw this room.
Yeah. There's a, you know, when you mentioned Hank Williams, it reminded me of your beautiful choice of cover songs, and how you'll weave into many concerts a song or two that suddenly connects people to a certain point in pop history, or you know, you kind of, but you have your own very personal stamp on it. Are these the songs like Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On" or Hank Williams' "I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry"? Or are they just songs that have been important to you, or that you just mentioned you saw Pop Staples doing that song, the blues song, and you just decided, oh, maybe this is something. Is that how it happens?
That happened that way. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes it's like that where, and I didn't realize that I'd heard that song a bunch of times, but I didn't even recognize it as the same song. This Pop Staples thing, I heard it. It just was this amazing sound, and then I realized that it was also on a Blind Willie Johnson record that I have, but it's a completely different. It sounds completely different. But there's like, sometimes these things will come up out of, you know, like Greg and I'll play Surfer Girl, which, like I said, that's the first song. It's the first actual 45 record that I bought. Or so there's stuff like that. I'll dig it up out of my past.
Yeah.
Just songs that have, or Marvin Gaye song that I played in high school or something.
Yeah.
But then there's that, like just the other day, that was more like this sort of sudden, or today there was in a coffee shop, you've really got a hold on me.
Yeah, the Smokey Robinson.
You know, I'm thinking, man, I haven't never really played that, and I'm thinking, I gotta play that. And it just happens in these sort of weird, random.
And you did that recording, which was kind of all "Have a Little Faith." The title was from the John Hyatt song, and with a lot of different styles.
Yeah, and that, I mean, a lot of that music it came from different. You know, some of it from my own memories, and then some of it was almost like trying to pay tribute to a particular, like I played a Sonny Rollins song, and you know, that song didn't come from so much a memory as a thinking about Sonny Rollins himself, or Charles Ives or Aaron Copland, all those. It was trying to. Also, that album was where I was trying to. Prior to that, I'd been concerned with just only playing my own original music. I never really played hardly any at all, cover songs, and sort of, I don't know if that's selling out, but it was like, you know, I was trying to.
Not really, because you really made it. Each of those songs were like Bill Frisell songs by the end.
But I mean, it was a conscious decision to play. Okay, it's going to be all cover songs, and I was trying to communicate, like show something of the world that I come from, you know. So I don't know if that's a low level of commercial.
I don't think so.
Something.
You've also, I remember some moments in your concerts where you've used music, maybe not used it, but it seems that a choice of a song relates to a point in where the world is, and that we've just entered into a war with Iraq, or that there's really stresses as there almost always are always are in the world. But I remember hearing the first time, I think you're doing Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On," and I felt, or when you've played Bob Dylan's "Masters of War" or "Hard Rain's Gonna Fall," it feels like it's a soft way of commenting on your concern around what's going on in the world. Is that right?
Yeah, it's just those things just keep. I mean, that music throughout my life, those are the things that somehow, I don't even know if comfort is the right word, but those songs, just those songs when we're in those situations, somehow they help me, and so I just, and they keep on being so relevant, or you hear them again and it's like you hear the same words,
right?
Like whatever, "Where Have All the Flowers Gone," or whatever, Pete Seeger, or all these songs that are they just keep on being relevant, and
unfortunately.
Yeah, but then they're beautiful too. I don't know,
there's a few moments other than what things we've talked about past projects at the Walker that I wanted to ask you about. Back in '86, when your first performance here was a collaboration with Jim Hall, who you had studied with a little bit, and I read that you've just released, or fairly recently, another duo record together.
Yeah, and actually when we played here was the very first time. It was soon after I got out of high school. I met him. It was like 1970. I met him through another teacher in Denver, and then I was lucky enough to be able to study with him. I took like 8 lessons with him in New York. And
what was it about his playing that attracted you?
Well, he was one of the. This was at this moment when it was like this just big explosion in my mind, discovering jazz, again, that word, but I don't know how else to, jazz music. And it was within just months, I heard Charlie Parker and Sonny Rollins and Monk and Bill Evans and Wes Montgomery, and just all these people suddenly, and it was like, it was like a, literally my mind was being blown, and he was kind of right at the center of what the guitar could be in there.
Because of his innovative approach to
harmonics. Yeah, I mean, and it wasn't even so much the guitar itself, it's the function that he had amongst the people that he played with that was so impressive to me, that he was playing with Sonny Rollins' group, or he was playing with Art Farmer or Bill Evans, and it showed me how the guitar could, he was like an orchestrator somehow. It wasn't just like some show off. I mean, he played amazing whatever, people say, oh, he doesn't play fast or this or that, but whatever, that's completely irrelevant. It's just it's more his role in the whole group around him, and that just sort of set an example for what maybe I could do. And so then I was lucky enough to get to study with him. I couldn't believe it, like, wow. I actually met him. He's like this larger than life guy, and he turns out to be this super nice guy, and made me feel comfortable, and gave me confidence. And this is in 1972 when I took the lessons, and then about 10 years later I was living in New York, and I hadn't really been in touch with him. It was quite a number of years later, and I was in New York, and I was walking down the street in his neighborhood, and he was walking down the street, and I ran into him, and excuse me, Mr. Hall, and oh,
It-
Bill, and he totally remembered me, and it just super friendly and blah blah blah. And then maybe another year after that, I did my first recording on ECM, and I sent him that. He was still living in the same apartment that he still is now. And so then it was suddenly like all this time had gone by, and he immediately called me and said, wow, he was really impressed with what I had done, and he said, you were taking lessons from me, and now I want to take lessons from he now I can learn from you. And it was just incredible the way he's just such a generous person. So then it was like, wow, I wonder if we could actually play together or something. I never would have dreamed that.
Right,
And then
sure.
so the first time I actually played with him in public was at the Walker in 86?
86, yeah. Which was do you remember that date at all? I mean, doing that together?
Yeah, and it was just an amazing, I don't know, it just was beautiful. And again, him as a person, he's just been such an inspiration.
Mm.
One of the things I remember, I don't know if this is relevant at all, but for me it was such a intense experience just playing the music with him and being on the stage with him, and we played together, and then we finished the concert and we went off again, it was another sort of a lesson for me. We went off the stage into the dressing room, and I was just like so high off the music and just so into that moment, and we go into the dressing room, and there's just like this massive, I mean, maybe it wasn't that many, but it seemed like a lot of people. My first reaction with these people would have been, man, get out,
Yeah.
leave us alone. Can't you see that we just did this amazing thing, and we need to have some, because we need to be together and congratulate ourselves and all this stuff. I was really kind of pissed off that there was this mob of people, and he was so like that. It was just like a little lesson, like, wait, it's not over yet. You still gotta. And he greeted all these people with just, and he was probably worn out and whatever else.
Yeah.
But it was like the gig wasn't quite over yet. He talked to each one of them in a real gracious way, and that helped me a little bit too. I mean, it's kind of an aside.
Around that time, 3 different times you then came back in various projects that John Zorn was developing. The Spillane Godard piece, and that was around the time when we first worked together, when I was still at BAM, and we did that big, Zorn did the big project around Morricone, and it was still a very memorable night, but it was a completely overkill project, but the guitarists were Jody Harris and Robert Quine and Ardo and yourself, along with 25 other musicians,
that was
playing Morricone's music and things.
Somewhere I saw a picture of that. I wish I had that, of all the guitars together. It was like, it was a far out guitar section.
Well, and then you came back with your own band several times. You played with Naked City, but in the start of doing these other more cross-disciplinary projects was really with the Buster Keaton films that I think we presented not at the Walker, but with Northrop across at the university, and and that in some ways, you started to explore some of these collaborations with film and other art forms, and I think of that now when having just a few years back supported the Disc Farmer project. But what attracts you to sometimes combining your music with other media forms, or creating it into a different context that's somewhat sort of more theatrical and things like that?
Well, I mean, I really, it's important for me to write music and generate ideas somehow. And I mean, what I really love is just sitting alone, and in addition to playing with my friends.
Right.
But I mean, I love just the act of, it's sort of like drawing or something. I guess it's almost, I think I have have some cartoonist friends, and it seems there's some, or artist friends, it's something about just writing music with it's just sort of like sketching or something.
So you do enjoy just like with music, I mean, just writing music in note
just
form,
sort of do
without
it.
a guitar in
Yeah, I remember a lot of times it's with the guitar, but also without the guitar, and it's just sort of letting it's an amazing feeling when your imagination starts to go and the thing starts to just sort of come out, and you let it come out, and I love that. But what I was going to say about if there's something out like a film or
these
a
still
picture,
photographs,
or something, that it has a way of kind of restricting you in a way.
Right.
You know, it kind of boxes you in. Like if it's a film, you have to deal with the time and
the action or whatever.
Yeah, it sort of, it's confining in a way, but then within the confines, I find that it helps me to sometimes generate things that I wouldn't. Like I'm saying, I love to just go off,
right,
and let my imagination run wild, but sometimes that other thing will help me come up with things that I wouldn't think of when I'm just left completely free. So and for me, that's the most attractive thing about all that, for film or writing, for being inspired by paintings or pictures or whatever. It's just that it'll get me to another place, or somehow it'll inspire me. Just that one little extra looking at a picture or something, something might happen that wouldn't happen otherwise.
I think you guys had the chance to wander a little bit through the galleries yesterday.
Oh yeah.
And it's one of the nice things about having our setup is having a visual art galleries just right next door, where artists can take a break and wander in and look at the contemporary art collection or exhibitions traveling through and things. And
that was great to get to do that.
Do you find that then that so you mentioned film and sometimes photographs? Are there other art forms that inspire you at times, or that you seek out?
I mean, painting. My wife is a painter.
Oh, is she?
And I have friends that paint and draw. I have one of, actually,
Jim Woodring is the cartoonist.
And there's a friend. He's actually the age that my parents would be if they were still alive. He was the first person that, he's a Charles Cajori. He's a painter in New York. This is way out. Is it okay if I talk about this?
Yeah.
But when I was young, my father worked with his father at the Colorado Medical School. But he was the age that my father is. So right now he's 80, I think he's 89 years old. He's still healthy and he's still painting. But we would have these dinners at my house when I was a kid, and whenever he would come from New York to Denver, he'd come, and my father and his father would be talking about some sort of incomprehensible scientific stuff. I didn't know what they were talking about.
Your father was a scientist?
Yeah, he was like a biochemist. But this guy was a beatnik painter guy from New York, and I was like a young teenager, And I would hang out with him, and he was like, yeah, have you ever heard of Thelonious Monk? And he gave me, I remember seeing this Monk record that he had, and he talked about going to the Village Vanguard, and he told me about all this kind of hip, cool New York stuff. Way, like when I didn't have any idea what it was, but he was actually the first guy that talked about Monk to me way before I knew what it was. And so then years and years and years, I just had a vague memory of this guy, and so it's about maybe 10 years ago, or not even that long ago, thanks to the internet. I said, I wonder what that guy, I knew he was a painter and he was in New York and blah, blah, blah. So I look on the internet and it's like, bam, all this stuff. And see, what's it called? The New York, it's on 8th Street in the Village. It's the New York, it's not the New York Studio School. He was one of the guys that started this New York Studio School, and he was friends with de Kooning, and he was like, just like, it was like, I didn't realize, you know, that what all he was involved in. But I found his name in the internet, and that he was still teaching at this school on 8th Street. So I just thought, this is crazy, but I'll just write a letter, and I just wrote a letter, and I brought it to the front desk at the school, and I said, is Charles Cudjoe? And they said, well, yeah, he teaches here one day a week, you know, but I'll give him the note. And so I just left it there, and then somehow it got to him, and it was like, he said, I had no idea that I said, I don't think you'll remember me, but he said, wow, he actually knew who I was
as a musician,
because he had come to see me at the Vanguard with Paul Motion and blah, blah, blah. But he didn't connect that I was the son of blah, blah, blah. Wait, like, I'm talking about, like, 40 more years before. So then I met him, and it was like this amazing, all these stories. He was, I'm going way off the subject, but I just got to tell you this. It just was all the painters that he was associated with in the, I guess, starting in the early 50s, and
abstract expressionists.
And my wife was with me, and we were sitting in Washington Square Park, and he's talking about crossing the street with de Kooning and Klein, or I forget all the guys, and the places he lived, and then also musicians, like I guess there's a picture of Monk at when Monk played at the 5 Spot with Coltrane. One of the pictures, right behind him, it says Kajori, and that was his first solo show or something.
Oh, really?
So he was there every night when Monk was playing at the 5 Spot, and then he was friends with Morton Feldman, and all these guys were all hanging out,
and he kind of introduced you.
Yes,
to
I mean,
he sort of
and it just,
other world.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and then he said, so now I'm coming all the way back. The thing about painting, and he said, when we were sitting in Washington Square Park, he said, after all this time, he said, the one thing I'm certain of is that drawing is a worthy endeavor. It's just a simple thing, but there's something about that human impulse to do that I really relate to.
Yeah.
Like, just as a kid, I would draw
right.
monsters and hot rods, and it's somehow it's connected a lot to the music. Just that.
Yeah. That simple pleasure of just making something.
Yeah. And it's something that I think everybody, I mean, not everybody can or does, but it's sort of I think it's something important about it.
Yeah.
Or
And it ties us very much back to, you know, what made you the musician that you are, and how hard to identify or you know, sort of expect how these influences in a life lead to a creative body of work. That this guy happened to visit,
yeah, it's
you know,
all
a friend of your dad's and things like that, and introduce you to Monk and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just such a, I don't know how it all just seems like random.
Yeah. Well, you know, and it also ties to our role here at the Walker as an arts center, and how these disciplines do have a relationship to one another, and how through its history in creative music, you know, painters and sculptors and filmmakers had a direct relationship personally with creative music, and those lines would blur together.
Yeah,
quite
they would
regularly.
hang out with each other and talk about stuff. And
well, it's is there any other last things that you'd like to that you wished I'd asked you, or that you'd like to add about your project here, which is called Baghdad Seattle Suite, and premieres tomorrow night, the world premiere, and then goes on to Albuquerque, New Mexico, at Outpost, and or anything else that you'd like to mention?
I mean, just again, this place for me has been one of these, I don't know what the right word, it's not like an oasis, is that the right word? But it's, I mean, it's just, when I think of, even as we were talking, I was, you know, remember, like, I actually met Greg Lease at the Walker Arts Center for the very first time. But I mean, not just the gigs, but the other just things that have happened. Or when Greg and I played for that opening, I saw Chuck Helm was here.
Chuck came out for it.
And then we started talking about the Disc Farmer thing again. That was sort of what got that thing going. And
then Chuck and I, we joined in it together to help support it.
And I mean, there's just so many important moments in my, I mean, I guess I just want to thank you really big time for, because I mean, I've said that before, but it's I think the very first, when I first started to do my own music, you know, taking these little baby steps and being unsure of what I was doing in the 80s or whenever it was, and you know, I was living in New York and I'd play in a little bar somewhere, maybe, you know, but this was, and then I'd go to Europe. I mean, Europe has been a place where things can happen, but in this country, this is a pretty, it's not pretty rare, it's like, it's very rare. I mean, it's, and I've just had so many, the beginnings of so many things have happened here. Just so anyway, thank you for that.
Yeah, well, it's been, of course, our great pleasure, and I think it's one of the things the Walker tries to do and it is really one of the things that is so exciting about being here, is that it's just not about introducing new artists or maintaining relationships with mid-career artists, but really with people like yourself and artists like Trisha Brown and Merce Cunningham and, you know, Ornette Coleman and others. It's about really sustaining a body of work.
That's the other thing too. It's not just this. There are places that, you know, maybe they want to have the latest cool thing, and then you do that if you happen to be in that moment, and then they're on to the next. But there is this continuity that can happen over
decades.
Yeah, it really, now, I mean, it's frightening.
Yeah.
Think how long it's been now. But.
Well, Bill, I so look forward to tomorrow night, and it's a pleasure to have you here for the week, and thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.